An alien prophet spoke. If you strike first, they'll never stop. He was right. At the battle's height, humans suddenly materialize within the Solaran fleet, using reverse-engineered micro-jump technology, striking from impossible proximity. As vessels explode around him, Prophet Veshnal seizes communication systems, broadcasting suppressed data that vindicates his warnings while pleading for peace, challenging his civilization to choose wisdom over destruction before it's too late. The vast observation dome of the Aurelius space station hung in silent orbit around Arvona, its crystalline panels refracting starlight across the assembly chamber below. Within the Grand Hall, representatives from across the Solara Alliance gathered, their diverse forms creating a mosaic of evolutionary paths that had, against all cosmic odds, converged into sentient civilization. Some floated in suspension tanks, others perched on elevated platforms, but all focused their attention on the central podium. Prophet Veshnal stood there, his slender frame outlined against the backdrop of Arvona's azure hemisphere. His four eyes, arranged in vertical alignment on his elongated head, scanned the assembly with measured patience. The iridescent ceremonial robes of his diplomatic caste fluttered gently in the station's artificial current. "Esteemed Council," Vesh began, his translator module converting his native clicking language into the Alliance standard. "The evidence compiled by the Stellar Observation Authority confirms what our preliminary scans suggested. In approximately 10 solar cycles, the humans of Earth will achieve functional interstellar capability." A ripple of agitation swept through the assembly. Vesh had anticipated this reaction. He had spent 3 decades studying human psychology, becoming the foremost diplomatic scholar on Earth's peculiar species. His research had earned him the rare title of prophet, one whose analysis so accurately predicted behavior patterns that it bordered on precognition. "The window for decision is narrowing," he continued. "We must determine our approach to Earth before their technology permits them to discover us. I recommend—" "We've heard enough recommendations. Prophet." The interruption came from General Harkin, commander of the Celaran military coalition, a hulking figure with armored exoskeletal plates. Harkin approached the central floor with the characteristic heavy stride of his warrior caste. "Your endless calls for patience have already delayed necessary action for 2 cycles." Vesh's upper eyes narrowed slightly, the closest his species came to expressing frustration. "General, I urge the Council to consider the psychological profile I've compiled. Humans display remarkable adaptability and—" "Adaptability means unpredictability," Harkin cut in, activating the central holographic display. "And unpredictability presents an unacceptable security risk." The hologram materialized between them, a spinning blue-green sphere that every being in the chamber recognized as Earth. With a gesture from Harkin, the image transformed, displaying a time-lapse of human technological development. The acceleration was unmistakable, from primitive flight to orbital capabilities in less than 2 centuries. "Their rate of advancement exceeds any species we've encountered," Harkin continued. "Their history is defined by warfare. Their fiction obsesses over cosmic threats, and their first instinct upon discovering new technology is to weaponize it." Harkin's aide, a sharp-featured officer named Lyric, stepped forward with a data crystal. "Our simulations predict a 78.3% probability that upon discovering the existence of alien life, humans will develop weapons capable of interstellar deployment within 3 cycles. Vesh felt the chamber's mood shifting. Fear was spreading among the delegates, that ancient, primal emotion that even the most advanced civilizations couldn't fully transcend. He needed to redirect this conversation before it spiraled toward the inevitable conclusion Harkin was engineering. "Simulations based on incomplete data," Vesh countered. "You examine their military history, but ignore their capacity for peace. You study their weapons, but overlook their art. You count their wars, but disregard their treaties." Ambassador Miran of the Diplomatic Corps rose from her cushioned platform. Her bioluminescent skin pulsed with the calm blue patterns that signaled agreement. Prophet Vesh has spent his career studying this species. Perhaps we should protect ourselves while we still maintain technological superiority. Harkin interjected. He gestured again, and the hologram shifted to display a military simulation. Celeran vessels striking key Earth communication and defense infrastructures in a coordinated first strike. Operation Celeran Lightning, Harkin announced. A precision intervention that would cripple their orbital surveillance network and eliminate their nascent interstellar research facilities. Minimal casualties, maximum effectiveness. The hologram displayed Earth's orbital defense grid going dark, section by section. You propose an unprovoked attack on a pre-interstellar civilization? Vesh asked, his voice remaining measured despite his inner alarm. This violates the Solaran Charter's third precept of non-interference. It's not interference. It's prevention, Harkin replied. And I would remind the distinguished prophet that the Charter's first precept is the security of Alliance species. Vesh moved closer to the hologram, his robes shimmering under the artificial lights. Council members, consider the psychological impact. If we strike first, without provocation, without communication, we establish ourselves as aggressors. Human historical records show a consistent pattern. When attacked, they do not submit. They unite. They adapt. They retaliate with escalating force. His four eyes fixed on Harkin with unusual intensity. If you strike first, they will never stop. Not until they've achieved what they perceive as justice. The chamber fell silent. Vesh could sense his words had impacted some council members. But Harkin merely smiled, a gesture he had adopted from studying human expressions, specifically to unnerve Vesh. Let us put it to a vote, the High Counselor announced from her elevated platform. The motion before us, authorization for Operation Celeran Lightning. Vesh watched with sinking certainty as the votes were registered. Fear had done its work. By a margin of 7 points, the Council authorized the preemptive strike. As a final indignity, they also voted to suspend Vesh from his advisory position for the duration of the operation, citing emotional compromise. As the assembly dispersed, Ambassador Miran approached Vesh, her skin now pulsing with apologetic purple. This isn't over, Prophet. When they see the consequences of this action, they'll need your expertise more than ever. Vesh's vertical eyes blinked in sequence, an expression of grave doubt. By then, Ambassador, I fear it may be too late. The Celeran attack fleet departed within 2 solar days, a sleek armada of stealth vessels programmed with Earth's orbital coordinates. Vesh watched from the observation dome as they vanished into subspace, carrying with them what he believed might be the Alliance's greatest mistake. Operation Celeran Lightning was executed with surgical precision. Earth's major satellite networks and orbital defense platforms were neutralized in a coordinated strike that lasted less than 4 Earth hours. Celeran technology ensured minimal debris and undetectable signatures. To human observers, it would appear their systems had suffered catastrophic but explicable technical failures. In the aftermath, the council chambers buzzed with congratulatory exchanges. General Harkin stood triumphant at the center, accepting accolades from previously hesitant representatives. The operation proceeded exactly as simulated, he announced. Earth's surveillance capabilities have been reduced by approximately 87%. Their space agencies are in disarray, attributing the failures to solar flare activity. Most importantly, they have no evidence of extraterrestrial involvement. From his restricted observer position, Vesh remained silent. He had been stripped of his voting rights, but permitted to witness proceedings. A politically calculated humiliation meant to demonstrate the error of his cautious approach. But while the council celebrated, Vesh initiated his own investigation. Using his remaining academic credentials, he accessed the Alliance's historical archives on human behavior patterns. If he couldn't prevent the first strike, Perhaps he could still influence what came next. The archives confirmed what he already suspected. Throughout human history, surprise attacks had never demoralized their civilization. From Pearl Harbor to the Martian colonial rebellion, unprovoked strikes against human interests had invariably triggered disproportionate responses. Humans didn't merely seek to restore the status quo. They fought to establish dominance and ensure such attacks could never happen again. Vesh compiled his findings into an urgent report. But the Council's administrative filters rejected it. His security clearance had been too severely restricted. Undeterred, he sought another approach. Meanwhile, the first concerning reports began trickling in from Earth observation posts. Rather than falling into confusion, Earth's space agencies had accelerated their programs. Emergency funding had been approved across national boundaries. And, most worryingly, military satellites, previously disguised as civilian infrastructure, were being repositioned toward the outer solar system. In the Celeran security briefing room, Vesh watched from the back as Lieutenant Rylas presented these findings to an increasingly uncomfortable General Harkan. "They're coordinating a response, sir," Rylas reported, his exoskeletal plates clicking nervously. "Our intelligence indicates they suspect external interference. The humans are calling it the Dark Day event." "Suspicion isn't evidence," Harkin dismissed. "Their technology can't track our stealth signatures." "With respect, General," Rylas continued, "they've doubled patrols at their lunar and Martian outposts. They're constructing additional sensor arrays specifically designed to detect anomalous energy patterns." Vesh stepped forward. "Breaking protocol. They're adapting to our methods, just as their history suggested they would." Harkan turned sharply. "You're not authorized to participate in security briefings. Prophet. Yet, here I stand, while your perfect operation unravels." Vesh replied. "The humans are demonstrating exactly the pattern I predicted. Unification in the face of perceived threat, accelerated innovation, and strategic redeployment." Before Harkin could respond, the briefing room's alert system activated. Lieutenant Rylas rushed to the console, his movements betraying alarm. "Attack on our lunar observation post," he reported. "Human forces breached the stealth field and deployed some kind of projectile weapons. Primitive but effective. We have casualties." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Harkin's features. "Impossible. They couldn't have detected." "They didn't need to," Vesh interrupted. "They suspected. They tested. They confirmed. The classic human approach to unknown threats." Over the following weeks, similar reports emerged across the solar system. Small human strike teams had begun targeting Celeran outposts, not with overwhelming force, but with precise, probing attacks. Each engagement provided them with more information about Solaran technology and tactics. The Council reconvened in emergency session. This time, Vesh was permitted to attend as a consultant, though his recommendations were still subject to military approval. "This limited resistance is precisely what our models predicted," Harkan insisted, though his confidence appeared diminished. "Localized, disorganized responses that pose no strategic threat." "You misunderstand human psychology," Vesh countered. "These aren't disorganized responses. They're reconnaissance in force. They're testing our capabilities while developing countermeasures." High Counselor Alara, who had previously supported Operation Lightning, now turned to Vesh. "What do you recommend, Prophet?" "Immediate diplomatic contact," Vesh said without hesitation. "Acknowledge our responsibility for the initial attacks. Offer reparations and technological exchange." Harkan's exoskeleton plates flared in outrage. "Absolutely not. We maintain technological superiority. The appropriate response is to escalate, eliminate their capacity for further resistance." "Escalation is what they expect," Vesh warned. "It will confirm their worst fears about extraterrestrial contact and justify unlimited mobilization of their resources." But fear once again overcame wisdom. The Council authorized Harkan's second phase operation, a direct assault on Earth's major military installations and emerging spaceports. The Celeran fleet deployed in greater numbers this time, abandoning stealth in favor of overwhelming force. From orbit, they launched precision strikes against key human defense infrastructure. Cities were spared direct targeting, but the electromagnetic pulse weapons disrupted power grids across continents. From his quarters on Arilla Station, Vesh watched the attack telemetry with growing horror. He had been completely removed from the command structure now, relegated to the role of academic observer. The Council had determined his emotional investment in human culture represented a security liability. "They're making a catastrophic error," he told Ambassador Miran during one of her discreet visits. "Every moment of this attack is being recorded by human survivors. Every destroyed building becomes a monument to resistance. They're creating exactly the narrative that will unify humanity against us for generations." Miran's bioluminescence pulsed with sympathetic patterns. "A growing minority in the Council shares your concerns. Vesh, the human response has been unexpected." "Not to me," Vesh said bitterly. "Their history predicted every aspect of their behavior. When attacked, humans don't break, they transform. Fear becomes resolve. Disparate groups become unified forces. They develop technologies at rates that defy conventional development curves." Reports from the engagement zones confirmed Vesh's assessments. Human forces had begun deploying rudimentary, but effective countermeasures against Celeran targeting systems. They had adapted their existing weapons to target previously unexploited weaknesses in Celeran shield harmonics. Most concerning, they had begun salvaging damaged Celeran technology. Then came the most alarming development. A Celeran scout ship had gone missing near the asteroid belt. Initial reports suggested it had suffered a catastrophic system failure, but subsequent investigation revealed signs of human salvage operations. Vesh felt physically ill when he learned this news. The scout ships contained navigational data, including the coordinates for the Arilla station and basic information about Celeran subspace technology. By the time the Council acknowledged the severity of the situation, human forces had already begun their counteroffensive. Using captured Celeran technology, combined with their own innovations, they launched devastating hit-and-run attacks against the invasion fleet. Their tactics were unpredictable, their targets seemingly random, until Vesh recognized the pattern. "They're not just fighting back," he explained to the hastily reconvened Council. "They're learning. Each engagement tests a different aspect of our technology. They sacrifice ships to confirm our response protocols. They're creating a comprehensive tactical database." General Harkan, his authority now openly questioned by junior officers, responded with the only approach he understood: greater force. He ordered the Celeran fleet to concentrate for a decisive engagement near Earth's orbit. "We will eliminate their emerging fleet in a single battle," he declared. "Our combined firepower will overwhelm whatever countermeasures they've developed." The decisive battle began at the edge of the asteroid belt, where human forces had established hidden shipyards. The Celeran fleet approached in standard combat formation, energy weapons charged for maximum effect. But the human vessels weren't there. Long-range scans showed only abandoned structures and deactivated defense systems. "A retreat?" Harkan wondered aloud on the command bridge of the flagship. "No," Vesh replied, having finally been summoned as consultant when the previous strategies failed. "A trap!" As if summoned by his words, dozens of small human vessels suddenly appeared within the Celeran formation, impossibly close, as if they had materialized from subspace itself. The implications struck Vesh immediately. "They've adapted our micro-jump technology," he said, his translator barely keeping pace with his agitated clicks. "They reverse-engineered it from the captured scout ship." The human vessels opened fire from point-blank range, targeting the specific vulnerabilities they had identified through weeks of probing attacks. Celeran ships, designed for long-range engagement, struggled to respond to threats within their formation. As the battle descended into chaos, Vesh made his decision. Using the emergency protocols granted to him as a senior diplomatic advisor, he overrode the communication systems on the flagship. His face appeared on view screens throughout the Solaran fleet and, most importantly, on all Alliance communication channels. "This is Prophet Veshnal," he announced. "I am transmitting historical and psychological data that explains our current failure. The human response was predictable based on their evolutionary and cultural development. They are not behaving irrationally. They are following a consistent pattern that our military leadership failed to acknowledge." He transmitted his complete research archive, including the rejected reports he had compiled since the first attack. The data showed clearly how each human response followed established behavioral patterns, and how those patterns had been dismissed by Harkin's command structure. "I call for an immediate cessation of hostilities," Vesh continued. "Our first strike policy has created exactly the determined enemy we sought to prevent. Only diplomatic engagement can prevent a generational conflict that will drain resources from both civilizations." Harkan attempted to terminate the transmission, but Vesh had encoded it with diplomatic override protocols that even military leadership couldn't easily breach. The battle in the asteroid belt continued for 17 more hours. By its conclusion, the Solaran fleet had suffered unprecedented losses. Worse, a small contingent of human vessels had broken through the defensive perimeter and obtained the jump coordinates for Aurelis Station itself. The council chamber was somber when they reconvened. General Harkin stood at the center, his normally dominant posture now rigid with defensive formality. "The operation has encountered complications," he admitted. "However, our technological advantage remains, with additional resources." "Enough!" The word came from High Counselor Alara, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. "Your strategy has failed, General. Twice. We followed your recommendation. Twice. We have suffered the consequences." She turned to Vesh, who stood at the observer's position. "Prophet, you predicted this outcome. The Council recognizes the error in dismissing your expertise. We reinstate you to full advisory status and request your immediate guidance." Harkin's exoskeletal plates flared in protest. "This is outrageous! One setback does not invalidate." 27 destroyed vessels. 342 casualties. Compromised security for our home system. Alara enumerated. "These are not complications, General. They are catastrophic failures." Vesh stepped forward, his robes now bearing the full insignia of his diplomatic rank. "The situation remains salvageable, but we must act quickly. Human vessels are already en route to Aurelis Station. They possess limited jump technology, but lack the stabilization systems for precise navigation. This gives us approximately 36 hours to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Harkin demanded. "To surrender to a pre-interstellar species?" "To negotiate," Vesh corrected. "Humans have a remarkable capacity for both vengeance and forgiveness. Their history shows that even after the most bitter conflicts, they can establish peaceful relations, but only when specific psychological conditions are met." Over Harkin's continued objections, the Council voted to authorize Vesh's diplomatic initiative. With the military option discredited, even previously hawkish representatives now supported engagement. Vesh worked tirelessly through the station's night cycle, preparing the diplomatic protocols. He studied the latest intelligence on human command structures and identified Admiral Petra Novak as their likely representative, a military leader with a reputation for strategic brilliance tempered by ethical restraint. When the human vessels arrived at Aurelis Station's coordinates, they emerged from jump space in a defensive formation. Their technology was crude by Solaran standards, a hasty adaptation of salvage systems, but their tactical positioning was flawless. Using the station's long-range communication array, Vesh transmitted his message on all frequencies. "Human vessels, this is Prophet Veshnal of the Solaran Alliance. We request cessation of hostilities and propose immediate diplomatic negotiations. We acknowledge responsibility for the unprovoked attacks against Earth and offer reparations. The response came after 7 tense minutes. Admiral Novak's face appeared on the main communication screen. A human female with dark skin, close-cropped silver hair, and eyes that reflected both determination and cautious hope. "Prophet Veshnal," she said, her voice translated by the station's linguistic system. "Humanity is prepared to discuss terms, conditional on immediate withdrawal of all Solaran military forces from the Sol system." Vesh noticed how carefully she had phrased her response, acknowledging his title while making a clear, limited demand. This was not the language of unconditional surrender that Harkin had predicted. The negotiations proceeded in stages. First, an immediate ceasefire was established. Solaran vessels withdrew to pre-designated coordinates outside the solar system. Human ships maintained defensive positions, but suspended offensive operations. Then came the more challenging phase, face-to-face negotiations. Admiral Novak and a small delegation of human representatives agreed to board Aurelis Station, while Vesh assembled a diplomatic team that intentionally excluded General Harkin. The first meeting was tense. Novak and her team displayed the vigilant body language that Vesh had studied in human diplomatic encounters. They sat stiffly, maintained consistent eye contact, and positioned themselves with clear sight lines to both exits and Solaran representatives. "Admiral," Vesh began, "I wish to personally express regret for the actions taken by the Solaran Alliance against Earth. Our leadership made a grave error in choosing preemptive aggression over peaceful contact." Novak's expression remained measured. "Your regret is noted, Prophet. However, Earth requires more than words. We have lost thousands of lives. Our infrastructure has been severely damaged, and most significantly, our trust in the possibility of peaceful coexistence with alien civilizations has been deeply compromised." "All valid concerns," Vesh acknowledged. "The Alliance is prepared to offer technological assistance for reconstruction, medical knowledge to treat the injured, and a complete withdrawal from human territory." "And guarantees against future attacks?" Novak pressed. This was the crucial moment. Vesh had prepared extensively for this question, knowing it would determine whether humans could ever trust the Alliance. "We propose the establishment of a demilitarized zone encompassing the Sol system and its immediate stellar vicinity," Vesh said. "This zone would be monitored by a joint Human-Solaran Security Council with equal representation. Additionally, we offer shared technology for defensive systems that would protect Earth from any potential aggressors, including rogue elements from our own alliance." Novak's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her diplomatic facade. "You would provide us with Solaran defensive technology." "As a gesture of trust and commitment to lasting peace," Vesh confirmed. "Our analysis indicates that humans will develop comparable systems within decades regardless. We prefer to guide that development toward defensive rather than offensive applications." The negotiations continued for 7 Earth days. Tempers occasionally flared, particularly when discussing the extent of reparations or the specific technologies to be shared. But throughout the process, Vesh observed the human capacity for pragmatism, gradually overcoming their desire for retribution. On the final day, as the comprehensive peace agreement took shape, Admiral Novak approached Vesh during a recess. "Your prediction was accurate," she said quietly. "Which prediction, Admiral?" "That we would never stop," Novak clarified. "Had your forces continued their attacks, Earth would have committed everything to the fight. We were preparing to convert our entire industrial capacity to wartime production. Our scientists were working around the clock to reverse engineer your technology. We would have pursued your fleet across the galaxy if necessary." Vesh's 4 eyes blinked in vertical sequence, an expression of solemn understanding. "Just as human history suggested you would." "Yet here we are, negotiating peace," Novak observed. "Because the pattern has 2 paths," Vesh explained. Humans never stop when attacked, unless the aggressor demonstrates genuine remorse and makes meaningful amends. Then, remarkably, you can shift from implacable enemies to committed allies with surprising speed. The peace treaty was formalized in a ceremony that combined Celeran ritual with human diplomatic protocol. The document established the Sol System Protection Zone, created the framework for technological exchange, and outlined the reparations program for affected human communities. Most significantly, it established the Interstellar Peace Council, a joint governing body that would oversee human-Solaran relations moving forward. By unanimous vote of both delegations, Prophet Veshnal and Admiral Novak were appointed as its first co-chairs. After the ceremony, a memorial service was held for those lost on both sides of the conflict. In the observation dome of Arila Station, representatives from Earth and the Solaran Alliance gathered to remember the cost of their brief but devastating war. Vesh stood beside Admiral Novak as the names of the fallen were displayed across the dome's transparent panels, superimposed against the backdrop of stars. "We nearly made a mistake from which there would have been no recovery," Vesh said quietly. "There's an old Earth saying," Novak replied. "The first casualty of war is truth. Your leadership abandoned truth when they convinced themselves we were a threat that needed to be eliminated. And your people embraced truth when you accepted peace instead of pursuing total victory," Vesh observed. "Not all of my people," Novak admitted. "There are those on Earth who wanted to continue fighting, who argued we should use your technology to ensure humans would never be threatened again. Just as there are those in the Alliance who still believe the only mistake was not striking hard enough," Vesh said. "Our work is not complete with this treaty." "It's just beginning," Novak agreed. The memorial concluded with a joint statement of reconciliation, read alternately by Vesh and Novak. It acknowledged the tragedy of the conflict while committing both civilizations to a different path forward. As the assembly dispersed, Vesh remained in the observation dome, watching the distant shimmer of stars. Ambassador Moran approached, her skin glowing with the deep blue of respect. "The Council is calling it the Veshnal Doctrine," she informed him. "The principle that preemptive aggression creates the very enemies we fear, while engagement and understanding build the allies we need." Vesh's upper eyes narrowed in what humans would recognize as a smile. "A doctrine I hope we never need to invoke again." "And General Harkin?" Moran asked. "Reassigned to historical analysis," Vesh replied. "Perhaps studying the past will help him better understand the future." As Arila Station continued its silent orbit around Arvona, Earth and the Solaran Alliance began the long process of building not merely peace, but partnership. Research teams collaborated on sustainable energy systems. Cultural exchanges introduced humans to the artistic traditions of a dozen alien species. Joint security forces patrolled the boundaries of the protection zone. There were setbacks and tensions, as expected. Cultural misunderstandings led to diplomatic incidents. Extremist factions on both sides attempted to undermine the peace process. The painful memories of the conflict occasionally resurfaced in public discourse. But each challenge was met with the framework established by the treaty: open communication, shared responsibility, and the fundamental recognition that different species could choose cooperation over conflict. One cycle after the treaty signing, Vesh received a transmission from Admiral Novak. Attached was a recording of the first human vessel equipped with Alliance-approved jump technology, successfully completing an interstellar journey. "You were right about something else," Novak's message read. "We achieved in cooperation what might have taken decades in isolation. Perhaps there's a lesson there for all species who look to the stars and wonder whether they'll find friends or enemies." Vesh composed his reply carefully, aware that his words would be preserved in both human and Solaran historical records. The universe tests all intelligent life with the same fundamental choice: whether to reach outward with weapons or with open hands. We nearly failed that test. May future generations learn from our experience that the path to security lies not in striking first, but in understanding deeply. The message traveled across the newly established subspace communication network, bridging the gap between civilizations that had so recently been at war. In the vast observation dome of Orela Station, Prophet Veshnal watched the stars, with all four eyes open, seeing not just what was, but what might yet be.